Welcome to episode 282 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, July 19th, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by Jay Tripp.
Hello.
Hello. How you doing,
How are
sir?
you? All right. I'm finally mostly not underwater anymore, and most of the roads are open, and there's no flooding in my basement, so, all's pretty well over here. And you got the weather that we got, so how are you?
Well, I'm fine. It didn't rain as much as it should have. The garden's doing great. Things are blooming. Birds are having more babies. Everything's just wonderful in my world of Bambi over here. Baby deer everywhere. It's just fantastic. I practically live in the metro parks. I got bunnies eating the bird food. My birds are happy. I fed them. I tell you, the kind of life I live. I'm like a gnome.
No offense, but I don't imagine you as the mountain man that you just described yourself as at all.
I'm definitely not a mountain man, but I just...
Do you own a flannel shirt?
No.
We need to get you a flannel shirt.
But I should, because I love the grunge movement in music, which we haven't spoken about on this show. But before we dive into that, I can tell you anything you want to know about the grunge movement, man. What an awesome era of music from Seattle. But anywho, we didn't have last week I said that I was going to work on getting someone from the WordPress hosting group. I completely did not realize that I was speaking of, it's actually a WordPress Facebook group, kind of like Advanced WordPress is a Facebook group. There's a WordPress hosting group. I thought it was an official thing sanctioned by it was a WordPress project, like an area. And I'm apologies for that, but maybe we'll work on something like that on a future episode. And then today we didn't have a guest, so I reached out on Twitter, said, hey, anybody volunteer who wants to volunteer to be on this show? And lo and behold, we had a winner, and his name is Cody Lendefeld, who is a senior web strategist and founder at ModeEffect, and he does WordPress and WooCommerce for enterprise companies, technology innovators, and e-commerce store owners. So as you can imagine, we'll probably talk about WooCommerce today. And Cody, thanks a lot for volunteering on the show, and no pressure, sir.
Yeah, sounds good. And checks in the mail, right, guys?
Yeah, I accept Mountain Dew as a form of payment as well.
Oh no, he wants his payment. He's not paying us. He wants to know where his check is.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Well, it was Jeff's assistant said that it was already in the mail as of last night.
Yeah.
They went to the mailbox and put it in.
Right. Cody runs an agency and he's familiar with WooCommerce, so he's expecting to get paid. This is hours is how you make your money in this business.
Yeah, I'm standing right in between my client and their money, so that's where I'm used to. I'm right in the middle of the money.
You're Mr. Escrow.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so Cody, tell us a little bit about your first time on the show, and why don't you start with your WordPress origin story?
Oh yeah, so way back when, in the early 2000s, for those of you who were in the web space then, I've been creating, designing, making websites going back to the early 2000s, and I would say towards 2005, 2006. We were just home brewing our own CMS with PHP and started to see a lot of folks putting together marketing sites using WordPress. I knew it was a blog solution, but I never thought of it as something as a full-fledged CMS. So just on a whim, I decided, instead of reinventing the wheel, let's just decide on creating our marketing sites that we're building for clients with WordPress, and never look back since.
Wow, so back in the 2000s, that's around the .com bubble or .com bust, right? Web 2.0, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, it was post Flash ActionScript, which is what I was building sites in not long before that, and happy to find a solution like this for sure.
I remember. I was in 10th or 11th grade. Shit just shows you my age back then, around the year 2000 with the Y2K bug. And I came across Template Monster, and they used to have all those really cool Flash intros and headers with the really cool techno music and the things that would pop out. And I'm like, man, how do you create those? How do you edit those? And then once I found out that it's ActionScript and it's not as easy as I thought it would be, I said, well, to hell with that. And I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, I remember the loading screens. Can you imagine being on a 56K modem or a 28K modem and it's loading?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it used to be. So tell us a little bit about Motivect, your company, and what you do.
Yeah, so we formed officially in 2010, and just really was an opportunity I saw as going from doing something freelancing and going into doing, like I said, setting up an agency. It was always a dream of mine. So just started fully doing websites for businesses and marketing sites and whatnot. And then as the years have gone on, we've really found a really nice niche in a couple of different areas where our teams really enjoyed working. So we built ourselves into an 8-person agency, and primarily who we help is WooCommerce stores and helping solve the really hairy problems technically with folks' online stores.
And I was checking before the show. WooCommerce market share across the internet, as tracked by BuiltWith, is actually down to 41%. It was 42% in December of 2016, but that's only 6 months, and not a whole lot can be taken from those numbers. But it still leads the way in terms of market share for hosted e-commerce solutions across the web. What kind of really cool, interesting projects have you built using WooCommerce?
Yeah, so I want to speak to that real quick. Just the percentage of stores. That totally makes sense, because my pitch is similar to Pippin's pitch when it comes to hosting. I've heard I don't know if we'll exactly quote him, but one of his things he says is, all hosting sucks. It's just some hosts make it suck less. And that's kind of my pitch for WooCommerce. It's like e-commerce on WordPress is not the best idea for a certain size store. So I totally understand why users or store owners tap out, because it just becomes a real big headache if you don't have the right partner to set it up and whatnot. And so transitioning to answer your question, Jeff, we have built a lot of different applications for and using WooCommerce. And one of the coolest things we've been able to do is really leverage that for an online SaaS type of platform where it can help manage digital subscriptions and membership subscriptions, along with ad hoc purchases that help a user be able to buy purchases all along the way, or add-on purchases and things like that. So we've done a fair amount of projects where it involves that type of workflow, along with your traditional stores and shipping and all that fun stuff. But yeah, that's primarily what we've done. And our website has some of those case studies on there and those types of projects.
In your experience thus far, what is probably the most difficult part or aspect of launching or managing an e-commerce store? Is it the shipping? Is it the prices? Is it the myriad of add-ons that has to be configured?
I think it all comes down to speed. Everybody is used to a certain, like we talked about with the Flash intros and all that stuff. Imagine being on a 28K modem and loading a website for 20 seconds. It really becomes very slow very quickly, because whatever host you're using, whatever extensions or plugins you're using on your website, it just bogs down the system, back end, front end, you name it. So I think that's the biggest challenge, as opposed to administratively, if you have a team that handles shipping and all that stuff. That's one problem that necessarily an agency can't fix. But when it comes to a store and really the lifeblood of somebody's business and getting money in and out, that's the biggest challenge I see when a store gets a certain size. It's just speed and all of the things that kind of ripple from that.
So a question that's been asked often, and Chris Lema has addressed this in various posts and whatnot, is can WooCommerce scale? Can WooCommerce be used in large, when we're talking about thousands of products and SKUs and things of that nature?
I think it can. We've seen it done. We manage a seven-figure store as one of our clients, and it's not easy. It's a challenge, but I think it has to do with architecture. There's so many pieces that need to come together in order to cause it to scale. And so it's really helped us have a lot of empathy for people in the web server space or the hosting space, agencies and companies as well. It takes it's doable, but it's a process. That's really what all it comes down to. It's not a simple answer, but it can be done.
I wonder if the landscape of e-commerce is still a lot of people out there who just want to sell one thing, or maybe they just want to sell 2 or 3 things, and they end up using WooCommerce. Is WooCommerce, is it too much? Do you think it's too much for people to just sell one thing or 2 things through it? I mean, is it specifically catered these days to people who want to have a broad selection of products to sell from their store?
I think it can be overkill. I think it really just depends on what happens, because most of the time you get that initial inquiry from a company that's wanting to either start to use WooCommerce, that started on Shopify, or they're a brand new company and they've somehow found WooCommerce. A lot of times the reasons that qualify using WooCommerce have to play with how they want to handle their customers on upsells and downsells and all that stuff. And Shopify is a great solution for that. So it all depends. I think in most cases it's really, I would say, I would advise a lot of folks starting out maybe not to use WooCommerce if you just are selling the one product. I think Shopify is a great fit for that, so long as you're on board with that startup cost and ongoing cost. So yeah, I mean, it all depends, but 1 to 2 items, 3 items tops, very simple. Shopify is a great bet for that.
John, you got any experience yet with WooCommerce, either for a client or personal use?
I do a little bit, but it's been a while. I've spent more time working with Easy Digital Downloads than WooCommerce. I think the last thing that I contributed to the WooCommerce code base was back when the UTF-8 MB4 stuff happened in WordPress core, just to make sure that WooCommerce's custom database tables would keep up with that and that everything would get indexed properly and stuff. So it was probably that long ago that I had to deploy any WooCommerce specific site. I've talked to Paul Majorana about it since he became sort of the lead in charge of WooCommerce on Automattic side. And I keep an eye on the WooCommerce store quite a bit to see what the trends are and who's building what. And just because I think it's like fascinating to see all of the things that WooCommerce gets bent around and forced to do, but that maybe it wasn't originally intended to do. But the one thing across the board that for every WooCommerce or EDD or really any e-commerce site in general, if it's a client or even if it's yourself or your own ideas, projects, all your things that you may want to think about building or deploying, or your own SaaS ideas and projects, the hardest part about all of these things, I feel like, is actually getting them off the ground and getting sales to happen, getting funnels, getting people to actually buy stuff. I mean, I think what Cody's sort of implying is that WooCommerce is a great tool to do those things with, but it's sort of more important or harder to get people to actually get to your site and buy your things. And so looking at what it is that you guys do at ModeEffects seems largely like technical and design and API oriented. Do you guys do anything on the strategy side of it, or do you try to stay away from that? Just because for me, thinking about selling stuff online is really hard. Like, I have no idea how to tell people how to be successful to sell stuff. What is your take on the strategy side of an e-commerce site?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of people in the WordPress space. We're all kind of, skilled in the technical side of things. So yeah, of course. I mean, we do our best to prime somebody on the digital marketing side of things, or just start thinking about it, because as you can appreciate, if it's somebody who's graduating WooCommerce, or if it's somebody who is completely starting out from scratch, they need a lot of education on just what to expect, because it's like, okay, what is your budget? Like, okay, save 2/3 of your budget for digital marketing. You've got to get people here and solve that problem. Fortunately, we have a really good in-city resource that we use for our digital marketing. So sometimes we can bring that all in-house depending on the size of the engagement. In fact, help people with digital marketing and help people get a good understanding of that. But we're quick to identify where we're tapped, because in the case of, say, a store that's doing 7 figures, you'd imagine they probably have a full, digital marketing outsource team or in-house team. And most of the time, it just depends. But focusing on the small guy, I think it's just education. I think it's really advising them on the best way to go, and that's why WooCommerce can be a tough sell as far as just that investment level. And just as you could appreciate too, John, I think with anything with BuddyPress or anything that has a membership type aspect to it, it just involves so much time that clients aren't accounting for.
Right.
And they just need a lot of education to understand not only the digital marketing and the advertising side of it, but also testing in total time.
That was, I think, one of the reasons why WooCommerce took off as quickly as it did. Is the Woo team originally really doubled down on building an ecosystem of extensions and add-ons around WooCommerce, where we never really tried hard to do that with BuddyPress or BBPress. They were sort of purpose-built to be what they were. They were really extensible, and in theory, you could do anything with them that you would want to do WordPress-wise or anything else. But the thing that really skyrocketed WooCommerce to the top was its flexibility and the ecosystem of add-ons and things that came around it that kind of helped turn WooCommerce into a pseudo membership site or a vendor plugin to help other people have their own sections within the store to sell their own products and attach their own payment percentages or affiliates and commission percentages and things. I mean, it was all those little add-ons to help WooCommerce be and adapt to all of the use cases that it would need to be. And forums are forums, so BBPress is what it is, and so people have plugins for it, but there isn't as much movement or as many options for how people talk in forums and subscribe to things as there are with an e-commerce store, where you're literally selling anything and you're booking things or you're selling actual physical products that need fulfillment or so on and so on. So I think that it was probably pretty smart for you to see that back in 2010, because there were other WordPress had WP e-commerce and Shop and other solutions back at the time that had a decent amount of momentum and tens of thousands of installs, if not hundreds of thousands in the case of WP e-commerce. I don't know what their numbers are anymore, but to see the trend back then and to focus on WooCommerce for your company back then was pretty smart, because it was still early days for WooCommerce. So what did that look like for you to decide to pick WooCommerce? Were you proficient with other stuff first and then saw the potential? What did that look like for you?
That's a good question. So yeah, all those platforms we tried and built all types of, got to use WP e-commerce, got to use Shop, and it wasn't, we really didn't double down on WooCommerce, to be honest, until we just saw a real opportunity for a way to differentiate. So we had done enough projects where enough of the projects kind of call for some type of cart or some type of e-commerce component. But it really didn't happen until the last 2 or 3 years, where we've just kind of planted that flag to say, we're helping e-commerce stores. We're helping WooCommerce stores specifically on the challenges, because now it's just come from a lot of experience, and that's really been the biggest thing I think that a lot of us challenge for, or are challenged for as agencies. If you're not huge and you're just trying to become valuable to one particular client, I think that's the way we can help really differentiate and help a particular audience.
I know Matt Mullenweg said that he thinks that both Jetpack and WooCommerce individually could be bigger than WordPress.com. And even though they're smaller than WordPress.com today, he believes that they each on their own could be several times larger. He's talking about multi-billion-dollar opportunities for both. So getting involved with WooCommerce and establishing your foothold now, if it turns out to be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, I think you and MotiveFactor are in a good place.
Yeah, and in fact, we're just going to work out like some type of a 5% deal on total revenues. So if they get to $1 billion, we'll be set pretty nicely.
So Automatic acquired WooCommerce back in May of 2015. Huge news. It's not something I saw on the radar. Completely shocked the hell out of me. I couldn't believe it. I had no sense of that was ever going to occur. But retrospect, it kind of makes sense now. Looking back at the before and after the acquisition, have you noticed? What trends have you noticed? Have you noticed anything different about the development strategy or the direction of WooCommerce itself? Do you think it's on a better path now after the acquisition?
I do. I think that it gives people who are really weighing the upside or the downside of migrating to WooCommerce or starting with WooCommerce. It gives them the confidence that there's a larger outfit behind it. And I think WooThemes was doing a great job. There's a lot of companies of similar size in the space in the WordPress ecosystem. But when you start to talk about Automatic and people understand, who that exactly is, I think that just gives the level of confidence that there is, a good ecosystem, a good support system, and a lot of resources being dedicated to growing that particular opportunity and company. So I think it just speaks to that, seeing that potential. And then again, total adoption rate, I think there's an exact effect on the confidence for a company like Automatic getting behind it.
There's been a lot of discussion, especially after the acquisition took place, of creating like a Jetpack, but for WooCommerce, or maybe even turning WooCommerce into like a WordPress.com, but for e-commerce. And who knows what direction it's going to end up taking. But let's say WooCommerce ends up turning into a software as a service product. How would that impact your business and the way you approach it with clients?
That's a good question. I think that solution is going to come. I can see hosting companies that have put pieces into place, but I think that it has to be similar to how WordPress is approaching customers. Or better, maybe a better example is looking at that GoDaddy customer or WordPress.com customer who is a micro onesie-twosie business starting out. It makes it so affordable for them just to sign up. And then it's a lifetime value play, getting somebody in the ecosystem, hoping their business will grow, and then they'll get that year after year renewal, potentially upgrade their plan and whatnot. And I think for WooCommerce to be able to scale or introduce some type of a SaaS model, you need to really focus on that type of a client and build an offering that's tailored to the biggest concentration. And so to answer the question in the longest way possible, I don't think it's going to affect me because the best potential client for ModeEffect is for a store that's already launched, generating money, and has those technical challenges. They just need that outside consultative help. So I don't think it's going to change unless somehow magically there's a software invented that somehow supersedes all server known challenges and traffic challenges, which, if that's the case, then God bless, I mean, hopefully it helps people's lives, but I don't see it affecting us too much.
I can tell you what I think is going to happen without any insider knowledge or little canaries tweeting into my ears. But, the way that I see those tea leaves forming is in the way of Jetpack becoming or including a payment gateway. And so if WooCommerce ends up on WordPress.com as a plugin that you can activate, or if it ends up going into the VIP Go or the Pressable, or if it goes anywhere, that Automatic as a company would still want to be able to handle the transaction from all of those WooCommerce deployments. And what better way to do that than via WordPress.com already accepting payments and having all of the connections in order to process payments at scale, and then be able to take 1% or whatever of every WooCommerce transaction that just happens to get piped through Jetpack's payment gateway. Like if I had that reach and it were my company and it was able to deploy something like Jetpack out into the world with some functionality like that, I feel like that would be the 10-year plan, would be to get that into everybody's hands so that you don't end up with 2 million separate WooCommerce installations all scrambling to try and update with the latest version of PayPal's API or Stripe's new API or whatever else. Just offload all that to Jetpack, let the people who want to manage that for you do it, and give them the 1% convenience fee for solving a problem so that you don't have to. That seems like that thing that everyone would want, that you wouldn't ever want to have to rebuild yourself or have customers be upset about breaking. And I don't know that do you guys build custom payment gateways for people anymore? That seems like a solved problem in WooCommerce most of the time, isn't it? So,
most of the time. I mean, it still surprises me what people use. But back on your point, I totally could see that coming with Jetpack. I think that also would help to kind of what Jeff was saying early on with the onesie, twosies, small stores. I think it really helps people better understand and have Automattic get an opportunity to go out and market to a particular audience to say, are you launching your brand new store? Are you selling this one product? Jetpack, WordPress.com, bam. The whole thing is like really so easy. And possibly there's a bigger use case, but then it allows WooCommerce an opportunity for them to differentiate and say, okay, here's a custom store, here's a larger store, maybe something that's going to eventually rival what Magento can do potentially. So I see on the Jetpack side, I think there's a potential to ramp up to be something similar to what Shopify is as far as a hosted platform, and because that Shopify is just a juggernaut. I mean, there's so much revenue from that company. It's a public company now. It's just insane. So I think WordPress, Automattic, Jetpack could take a bite out of that market and certainly serve customers there and sell them on an opportunity to have an inclusive environment that's hosted. But on the flip side, I think that WooCommerce could go for a larger play and say, this is now we can really differentiate, potentially for bigger stores, be a better solution. Say for people who might be thinking about using Magento or something hosted like BigCommerce or bigger, online stores. I think there's a lot of concentration there as well.
Yep. And Automattic's done such a good job of having stuff like Akismet or Gravatar, these like separate ethereal sort of out in the universe services that handle and scale to millions and billions of requests a month. And if they're with the experience that their systems team has and the development team has with things that aren't WordPress but really do a great job of making WordPress better, like Gravatar and Akismet, that being able to process payments in that same kind of style and way where it's totally transparent, you don't really know how it's happening or that it's happening, but all you do know is that it always works really well and you never really have any problems with it, and it's just this idle process that happens to lurk inside your Jetpack to make sure that at the end of every month you get your money for stuff that gets sold through your WooCommerce store. I mean, it kind of just seems like the ultimate way to scratch that itch, and in the way that makes WordPress and WooCommerce so good for users that the reason to use Shopify is suddenly not as clear as maybe it was before. So I feel pretty confident that would be the next thing that would happen.
Yeah, and you see that happening because Jetpack has kind of brought in all those services onto one roof. So it seems like that's just the missing piece there. And right now, to this day, as a shop owner, as somebody who is maybe on Shopify or they're selling something, they're either thinking about the next place, it is a legitimate question. Am I really wanting to migrate to WooCommerce if it's going to come with all of this, baggage and essentially going to add all this time and cost to my business? So there's absolutely a problem to solve there in terms of the technical oversight or the technical things that you'll need to do to maintain your store.
And then we'll look at like Jetpack or WordPress.com professional or business plans, either having an add-on option or maybe just even having a separate e-commerce option, which at one point they did have. They had a business relationship with Shopify, so you could actually use Shopify, I think via short codes or whatnot, and apply it to your WordPress.com site. I'm not sure if that relationship is still there. I doubt it. I don't know if they've renewed their contracts or whatever with Shopify, but they've had it before. But it totally makes sense that they would just replace that with, like you said, payment gateways, Jetpack, open it up to everybody, including WordPress.com, and then start charging for it.
I think the Shopify shortcode or widget, or might have been both or neither, was like a team meetup project from when I was there, or maybe just a little bit after, because I have a vague recollection of the development of that shortcode happening. And if my very fuzzy memory serves me somewhat correctly, that whatever the endpoint or API was that shortcode used, Shopify themselves deprecated or took away. And so the shortcode itself just stopped working. And
they killed off their plugin, I think, too.
Yeah, they killed off the plugin because nobody was working on the shortcode or the API, whatever it is that it did, and it's gone now. So you can't get it. So it's probably probably doesn't work on WordPress.com. I did want to get your thoughts real quick, perhaps, on some of the recent changes that WooCommerce has made to extensions. Extensions is a huge part of WooCommerce and where they make a lot of their revenue from. And they recently made a change to the shock of many, apparently, where they had 50% renewal discounts for extension subscriptions. They've recently removed that. So now you have to pay full price. There's no more discount for subscriptions. And based on how many extensions, I think quite a few, it's almost like WordPress sites. On average, there's probably 10 or 15, 20 different plugins people use on a WordPress sites. I've never run a WooCommerce store, but I could easily see how different little extensions for different bits of functionality, how you could get that way with the WooCommerce store. Just your thoughts on maybe the play there on removing the renewal discounts for extensions, and has that impacted you, your clients, or anyone?
That's a tough one. I think I could see both sides of the aisle as a consultant, as somebody who is trying to get a business owner to understand the value of things. I still think it's so affordable for what they're doing. It's just a challenge when you're starting out with your GoDaddy web builder client, that's paying $3 a month, and they're like, "Whoa, $10 a month? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not made of money here." So it's like we've gotten used to serving that person who's just coming through the door, starting a micro business client. So now it's like, okay, you've gotten used to using this thing. You, like in the case of, like you were saying with WordPress, you've got 10 or 15 plugins that potentially maybe Jetpack can solve. You're like, all right, forget it. I'm going to get rid of all these things because these plugins and licenses, they're too expensive. I'm just going to maybe do it myself, or I'm going to use, say, Jetpack and save a little money. But in the case of WooCommerce, these extensions are absolutely necessary to run your business, at least as far as what I understand with everything that's renewable through WooCommerce.com. So it's a little, I guess it's a little harsh, but I don't know. I mean, if they have warned people via email, if there is some type of announcement or some communication, I think that just makes sense as a business to do that. But either way, you can't really fault them, because I think that the downside is that a lot of these are so affordably priced that it still isn't going to have that huge of an impact on a business. I don't think, unless you're just, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it's as big of a deal as people are making it, honestly.
Well, I mean, don't read the comments on the article we wrote about on the tavern, because it's the end of the world and everything's on fire. Completely contrary to your economy. That's the way it is. The comments on the tavern. Hey,
yeah.
But so before we wrap it up here, I know you're a busy guy. Maybe you can give us a quick rundown of like a checklist of things people should think about or consider before perhaps choosing WooCommerce as their e-commerce solution.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about your host. I think it's all about just getting the right insights from somebody besides yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a store that's already launched and just created this huge just mess of code and plugins and things that take a long time to work through just because, they did it themselves or they, tried to, figure it out or hired somebody that was a me too. I think that's the challenge too, is there's a lot of, I think it's a challenge in the WordPress space because there's a lot of agencies that are us too or me too, and they'll take a WooCommerce project and quickly, it might not be built well. So I think it's about knowing what host you're working with in order to scale well, and then also having the right partner in order to really help you be advised on what's absolutely necessary for your store. And the beauty of this is, I think that, like in the case of ModeEffect, we can easily throw out some type of a site audit and just start there. Like really look into somebody's store technically and give them a roadmap of what they need to do in order to fix their store. And that's a good starting point. So even if you've gone as far as choosing a host that it's something that's not very scalable or cause problems, there's an opportunity to kind of catch something in flight and reach out to a company like us and say, hey, what is it going to take? Here's my store. How do we get something to best achieve our revenue goals here? Because really with e-commerce, every single second of load time, all that total process does affect your bottom line.
I think that's good advice. I agree.
And Triple J and I talked about it on a few episodes back, whenever that, way back sometime. But I think it was about the onboarding process of plugins and services. And WooCommerce, they spent a lot of time and research, and they've created one of the better onboarding sort of wizards when you first launch WooCommerce that I've seen in virtually any plugin. Have you seen that based on your experience? Are you able to tell us if that's been effective for clients as you walk them through that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I agree. They've done a good job basically focusing on getting somebody excited and inspired in order to get a site online and sell. I think they've also done a good job of putting together extension packages that help somebody literally just click a button and get something ready to go. Yeah, I mean, I think they've done as good of a job as somebody. I think the only thing that's not as apparent to maybe a customer or a client that's going to get the store built for them, like us, who's going to do it all, compile it all for them, they probably won't see all of that. So for the do-it-yourselfer, for somebody who's going to set it up themselves, absolutely. I think that's one of the best onboarding processes in the WordPress space.
And we briefly talked about it, and I want to get Mario on from Devrix because he's talked about this a lot. But the WordPress implementer, there are so many of them, and they create all these different sites, and then the agencies kind of come in and untangle the knots and put things back in a clean row. And I think it'd be cool to have him on it and sort of talk about the role of WordPress implementers and the positive, the pros and cons of that base of people working with WordPress on an everyday basis.
I really like the word implementer to describe like somebody's role in a team to getting like it's like we started off with developers and designers, and then we had architects, and we had all these other like secondary sort of supporting roles. But I like that they are now pretty mature in their like as a career path. Being an architect, you kind of know what that means now, and I think an implementer is a role that started off as sort of like you don't know how to write code, and maybe you're not a super good designer and whatever else, but you're focused on a little bit of UX and you know how all the pieces fit, so you're really good at bolting them all together and activating everything and going. But I don't think that that's it anymore either. I think the implementer role is a legitimate, bona fide, important person now on a team that can say, here is exactly how these things need to fit. I can get all this stuff up and working and passable and really being awesome. And now if you do need custom plugins or development, you need custom designs or logos or this or that, then we can offload that to the people that really double down and specialize in those things. But an implementer is someone who is comfortable owning all of those things. They really are sort of a polyglot in all of the multiple facets that there is, not just WordPress specifically, but on the web and elsewhere. So I like that we're using the term implementer more. It's cool that it's and that people are owning up to it and being implementers and saying and being proud to be implementers, I think is a great thing.
I feel like that's me. I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's because going back way back when, I mean, I used to write all the code and do the action script and the design, and I still love design. I feel like if I went back and took a job somewhere, I'd be designing. But yeah, I mean, from a WordPress standpoint, I've been in the space so long that even if I'm not even running code, I could take a builder plugin, put together a site, and really give a client a good understanding of that. So if Modeffect crashes and fails, if anybody's out there and needs an implementer.
Cody, I want to thank you a lot for being on the show and sharing your insight, both via Modeffect, your agency, and strategies and whatnot with WooCommerce. If people wanted to reach out to you, get in contact with your agency, or maybe just even you personally, maybe they wanted to ping you about a WooCommerce question, if you're up for it, how could people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, on the contact page at modeffect.com, I have a form you can fill out if you're looking for a project. I also have a link to my call schedule. So if you want to just get a quick call advice about your e-commerce store, happy to do that as well. So
excellent. And the link to Modeffect, of course, will be published in the show notes for the convenience of my listeners, because it's all about making you convenient. Cody, thanks a lot, and thanks again for being on the show, and all the best to you. And maybe in a few months, we'll have you back on, and maybe you can give us the state of WooCommerce. You can give us
there you go.
Maybe copyright infringement, the state of the Woo.
Well, there is WooConf coming up, so we could do it closer to then or after, whatever you prefer.
Or are you planning on attending WooConf?
I will be at WooConf, and I'm also speaking at WooConf.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll have you on after WooConf so that you can give us a rundown as to what that conference is all about, what you spoke about, and we'll talk about any of the news or information that comes out of WooConf. So how about that?
Well, then you're putting a lot of pressure on me to pay attention to everything.
And that depends on whether or not the check clears, right?
That's right. It might bounce.
Yeah, there's a lot of faith being put into this second. You wait until you get somebody on the air to get them to confirm for the second appearance. Like, well, now that we have 100 people listening, you're going to be on in a few months, right?
All right.
Yeah.
No pressure.
So good luck, man. Enjoy WooConf, and we'll have you back on here in a few months.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah,
no
thanks for being
problem. So there you have it. Cody Lendefeld. Yes, I got through the whole interview without messing up. He was on our great interview there with Cody about WooCommerce and what his agency Modeffect is working on, and some of the challenges associated with e-commerce. And e-commerce is hard. It's hard. I don't know. E-commerce is easy. I don't know if we'll ever be able to say that. Now, perhaps in the not so distant future, I don't know. But once you start getting involved with payment gateways, shipping rates, compliance, products, images, buy buttons, stock orders, SKUs, I mean, the gamut goes on. And next thing you know, e-commerce is one of the most difficult things that you've probably ever been associated with. So, e-commerce, what a challenge.
E-commerce is hard. Having a small business is hard. Hiring people is hard. Making sure that they get paid is hard. I mean, Cody has his work cut out for him, and he clearly has no problem taking on the big challenges between e-commerce and WordPress and the small business and everything. He's going after it hard, so it's cool.
You're talking me out of it right now.
So we did have a couple of news stories we wanted to talk about. Cody, feel free if you have something to do, you can leave or you can stick around. Yeah, it's up to you. We're going to run through a couple of news stories. And speaking of e-commerce, iThemes had an e-commerce product called Exchange. and it was actually released in 2013. So it's been 4 years already. Wow, it's actually been a while. I didn't even realize that. The company has announced that AJ Morris, who is a product manager at Liquid Web, at least that's his current title, he's taken over the project. And now it's not going to be associated with Liquid Web. This is his side hustle, his side project. So nobody can confuse there that this is going to be managed under Liquid Web. But he's gonna take over the project. And I know that Corey Miller, one of the founder of iThemes, has said that spending 4.5 years investing in the project, they wanted to find someone who could really give the project the attention it deserved, or they would have had to sunset the project. Thankfully, they found AJ Morris, who has created a new website called Exchange WP LLC. So that's where you'll be able to find all the information and development and releases for the Exchange product, exchangewp.com. Now, customers, of course, are no longer able to purchase Exchange or the add-ons on iThemes. They're going through the big transition process now of all the customers, the licenses, the extensions. All of that is being transitioned and migrated over to Exchange WP, which they expect to be completed, I believe, in early August. So, pretty cool development there. It's pretty nice to see that instead of sunsetting the project, they found someone to take it over. They really put their trust and faith in AJ Morris here. And if you're a iThemes Exchange user, probably the best news is you're not having to immediately go out and look for a replacement for your e-commerce store, which may end up could cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that someone was ready to let something go and someone was there to pick it right back up. It's not often that those two things happen in tandem. So it seems like it should be pretty great for users, which is really what it's all about. So props to both the iThemes folks, who are wonderful folks, and AJ also is a good guy. So props to both of you for big time for recognizing it and making it happen and making sure that users are taken care of.
And Morris says that Exchange is going to continue focusing on the independent publishers that want to keep the revenue they can while providing the simplistic experience and an easy-to-use e-commerce plugin that will help get their stores online quickly. And, a nice quote by Miller. He says that his job as CEO is to be a steward of the time and resources that they have at iThemes in order to save you best. So by giving Morris Exchange, this frees up the resources and time for iThemes to focus on their 3 core flagship products, which is Backup Buddy, iThemes Security, and iThemes Sync. And within that announcement, they hinted at a new project that they'll be releasing soon. No idea what that's about, but we'll keep tabs on it on the Tavern, and that might be one of the first places you find out about it. So
I'm going to say that I know nothing of this 4th project, just so that I can keep everyone happy.
And let's see, Jetpack Professional. The Jetpack Professional plan has introduced unlimited access to 200 plus commercial themes. So if you're a subscriber to the professional plan, the Jetpack Professional plan, you now have access to 200 pretty nicely designed themes on WordPress.com. And those include the commercial ones as well. And I made a joke. I said, well, one of the beneficial things of getting the theme from WordPress.com is that it won't come with 20 different sliders. And I believe it was Peter on Twitter who said, well, that's because the sliders are in Jetpack. But hey, that was a hell of a reply. That was pretty darn funny. But the plan is regularly priced at $24.92 a month, or $299 a year. So there's a browser that you can browse the different themes in. And I was wondering how this will impact the theme sellers. There are a couple authors out there who sell themes through the WordPress.com marketplace. And I found out that they have a subscription plan in place. So if the Jetpack, man, this is all tongue twister, so many P's. Jetpack Professional Plan subscribers, if they activate a commercial theme, that will be detected and a cut of the subscription fee will be awarded to that theme author. So that was nice to find out. And I've spoken to 2 or 3 different authors. They have no idea on how this is going to impact sales. They're optimistic about it, and they're looking forward to seeing what happens.
The one thing that is with the Jetpack, with Jetpack offering commercial themes, that's still that I feel like I haven't read enough about, that I probably should before I open my big mouth, is how Jetpack can have a commercial theme store in it via WordPress.org's plugin repository. Do you have any insight?
No.
Did you look into that at all?
You're gonna raise this issue, huh? That the whole store thing. Well, no, I haven't looked into it that deeply. I know that it's a concern that's been raised by others in the community, of course.
Right.
I mean, if we look back at the WP plugin store, I believe, if my memory recalls, it was a plugin for the WordPress plugin repo that if you installed would give you access to browse this like app store, but for plugins. Right. That was a third party. And .org says, no, you can't do that. And so it really affected the reach and marketability of the WP plugin store. It pretty much died on the vine that it started on, because it was not the plugin to browse the store was not allowed on WordPress.org. Now having a third-party theme store as part of Jetpack, and Jetpack is allowed on the WordPress plugin directory. I don't know. I don't know the specifics. We probably have to ask.
Yeah. Because I can imagine, and I think it would be interesting for Envato to have a theme forest commercial themes, so just to download it from WordPress.org.
And you know why that wouldn't happen is because not all themes on Envato or Theme Forest are GPL licensed. That's why it wouldn't happen.
But even if it only pulled in GPL licensed themes, and if it was able to filter and restrict the results, and what about the folks at WPMU Dev to have a portal plugin available on WordPress.org for their entire repertoire of add-ons and themes and plugins that they have, or the folks at Easy Digital Downloads. They kind of include or hint to add-ons, but they have to link all the way back off to their own store. They can't really do anything really deeply integrated like that. And so I'm curious to see what the literal rules really say, because I haven't reviewed those in a number of years, because it hasn't really been personally important to me. But
well, the guidelines have gone through revisions. They have been rewritten a few months ago. So that might be time to have Mika or Pippin, or have them both back on the show, and that would be something interesting to talk about. Let me tell you.
That would be fun. We should send them an invite and see who responds.
So our next news story, my co-host may know something about, and that's BBPress 2.5.13 was recently released, and it actually re-adds sanitization to anonymous user data. And if that's technical mumbo jumbo to you, don't worry, you're not alone. But it basically makes anonymous user data safer, right?
Yep. So there's a feature in BBPress that allows forums to not require registration, and so it works like WordPress comments, where a user can just reply to anything in the forums, like a comment, or they can create their own topics in forums without registering for an account. And so because we use custom post types and we don't use comments, means we have to sanitize that data and store it in a way that is not the same as the way that comments do it. And so it used to work that way. Somehow I broke it, and something came through HackerOne, and they were kind enough to privately and responsibly disclose that they had uncovered a very obscure way to capitalize on the thing that I broke, and they were nice enough to be real patient and give us time to fix it for BBPress 2.5, which allowed me to actually re-engineer some of the way that works for what will eventually be bbPress 2.6. And so, yeah, 2.5.13 just fixes the anonymous user data sanitization, makes sure that email addresses are actually email addresses, makes sure that websites are actually URLs, those kind of things. And so, but it's only for sites that turn this on. This is not on by default for anybody. And so once you turn it on, then you actually have to have a public-facing site that allows for anonymous users to just post whatever they want. And it's not real popular because it's a honeypot for spam. Spammers just want to post whatever they want, wherever they want. So it's not a huge concern for most people, but it's nice to have that stuff fixed. And it's also awesome to have people on HackerOne turning the switches on and off and trying to find the weird stuff. And it means if they're going that far in to find weird security issues like that, usually makes me feel good because none of the obvious, there's nothing more obvious than that, at least. So that's pretty cool.
And you might as well give us an update on what's going on with bbPress 2.6. My ears are burning.
So 2.6 is, well, the long and short of it is I've pretty much been waiting until I could handhold the migration for all of WordPress.org's topics and replies and favorites and subscriptions before releasing 2.6, because I don't really want to sabotage anyone that has a huge install like WordPress.org and have those migration routines take too long or quit halfway through or be problematic for anybody. So I've kind of been grouping them together. Like 2.6 will come out when WordPress.org is running 2.6, but it doesn't really have to be that way. So 2.6 is kind of ready to go. It's just the WordPress.org favorites and subscriptions that it's waiting on. So it's pretty awesome. So it could happen sooner than later, I guess. My answer is a non-answer, but
well, the sooner the better, because then boom, we can start working on 2.7.
2.7 and comments, replacing the comment river with a topic or a forum. I mean, that's been on your wish list for
let's
as
not
long
talk
as I've known you.
Let's not talk about it. Let's instead talk about WP Rollback. They've actually released a pretty cool update which adds multi-site compatibility and changelog preview. WP Rollback is a really cool plugin by WordImpress where it allows you to easily roll back to a previous version of a plugin or theme, actually. And in this update, of course, as we said, it's fully compatible with multi-site networks, so that gives super admins the ability to roll back extensions from the network plugin and theme screen or from the plugins and theme screen of the primary site in the network. Subsites do not have the ability to roll back plugins and themes for the entire network, which sounds like a good thing. Version 1.5 also adds the ability for users to preview the changelog for previous versions of a plugin, which makes it,
cool.
That's a very convenient feature.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the team has said that they've created this plugin in a way that is as close to core consistencies as possible, so that if ever the time came or if it was a good idea and they wanted to add this feature directly in the core, it should be a very easy process of migrating the code into core. Nobody has really shown interest or has been a track ticket, I believe. There might be one, but there hasn't been much discussion on adding something like this to core. I don't know if something like this would ever be added to core because there's such an attitude of update to the latest and greatest for security and everything else, that to have a feature in WordPress where you can go backwards seems counterintuitive to everything else that is in WordPress.
Yep. I've got two things. One, the folks at WordImpress are hot right now. Like between WP Rollback and Give, and like they're really focusing on making really good tools to solve really niche problems that everyone kind of talks about, but everyone is kind of afraid to solve because they're big problems. So you're right in every time that this idea of rolling back to an older version of a plugin or theme comes up, the response historically has always been like a hard no, like absolutely not. We don't want to make it easy for users to roll back to some old version of a thing. However, it comes up a lot, and it comes up when you end up with a plugin incompatibility, and if that happens, you don't have any choice. And so to leave a user in sort of a crippled purgatory sort of state where they did the right thing and it didn't work out for them is also one of those really terrible user experiences that it seems like the folks at WordImpress identified and they had empathy for and said, hey, if this happens to you and you're worried about this, we're going to take the initiative to build the solution for you. And so that is, in a nutshell, what I think exemplifies the WordPress community and what makes WordPress a good piece of software. So it wouldn't surprise me if this becomes a thing that people start looking at or thinking about, because it now that there's a plugin that works really well with multi-site support, people that maybe had a hard time imagining the value before cannot deny what there is in front of them now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next, I think.
And two quick things. WP Rollback is active on more than 30,000 sites, and it has nearly all 5-star reviews. It has one-star review, and that was because at the time it was not compatible with WordPress multi-site. But now it does. So hopefully they go back and they find that user and they tell them, hey, we just added this, and that user can actually go in and change their review if they want to. The WordPress.org system supports that.
And that's exactly what I mean, is for the users who need this, they're only going to have 5-star reviews because this is the only way to really do the thing that they need that WordPress doesn't let them do, and even that WordPress.org doesn't make really easy to find. So, of course,
it bypasses the whole process of having to delete the folder, log into FTP, upload the files, and all that other stuff. I do want to mention, this is very important, that the plugin authors recommend backing up your site before using it to roll back plugins and themes, or testing rollbacks on a staging site first, because WP Rollback is not capable of rolling back changes a plugin update is made to the database. So a backup can come in handy if the database changes or what's incompatible with previous versions. So, we make the assumption that maybe the changes are with files only, but if the database changes, WP Rollback has, that's something where VersionPress, comes in really handy, where it actually merges previous changes of the database and files back to previous states. But WP Rollback doesn't have that functionality. And they've also said that there's been thoughts of adding core updates and other different functionality to this, but then they believe it would really ramp up the support for the plugin, which right now doesn't really need that much support. So they're going to keep it lightweight, simple, and just keep it the way it is and keep it maintained with WordPress.
Well, and the idea of having an older version on purpose for anything doesn't usually happen. You don't go back and install an old version of Chrome. You don't install an old version of Slack. You may not always love the new version of iOS or Windows or whatever, but it's rare that you would want to go backwards unless you absolutely have
I'm not going to tell you what version of Winamp I have installed.
I don't think I want to know either, so thank you.
It's the version that whips the llama's ass. Oh, yes, I've always been wanting to say that. I'm glad I had an opportunity. Oh, this show's epic. In our last story that I wanted to talk about is Gutenberg. Yeah, we got some more news about Gutenberg. 0.5.0 adds a new verse block for poetry and a new display for recent blocks. So if you check out the Gutenberg editor, as you're messing around with blocks, some of the UI disappears, so it kind of improves the zenness, if that's even a word, of the editor. There's a weird issue now with it where it supports drag and drop image uploads, but as the image is uploading, it like blinks or fades in and fades out, and that's used to indicate, it's kind of like a status indicator of its uploading. And I know Sarah Gooding says it might not be the best UI to indicate an image is uploading. So there's that. And then there's the addition of a prose or a poetry block. And you know, as as I expected on the tavern, you know, some of the comments were very well, you know, whoop-de-doo and wow, you know, out of all the things to be working on, we have a poetry block. You know, kind of that's the mindset and the attitude that a lot of people are having thus far. But you know, that's kind of some of the updates that have gone into Gutenberg. Again, the new editor for WordPress, which is undergoing rapid development. So, you know, try it out, see what you think, and we'll keep you updated on the progress of this project on WP Tavern. But
people said the same thing when Jetpack or when WordPress.com started adding like LaTeX support for beautiful math.
yeah,
Like,
beautiful.
oh, well, why does this have to be in there? You know what? It's this is all about writing. WordPress is a piece of software for writing, and so if there's just because you don't use beautiful math or LaTeX doesn't mean that there aren't 2 million other people out there that do. And so the same thing with prose or poetry. Like, let the poets have their thing and don't. Who cares? Like, you will eventually at some point try it and use it, or maybe not. And if you don't use it, it doesn't bother you.
Do you think it's a coincidence that during the State of the Word near the end, Matt read us a poem, and now we end up with a poetry block in Gutenberg? Is that a coincidence?
Do you think it's a coincidence that one of WordPress's core slogans is code is poetry?
Okay,
I mean,
there you go.
Clearly, poetry is a part of the community, the culture, the software, and all of it. So
Leave it to us to connect the dots.
these are pretty obvious dots, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see. But you know what? Since you're talking about the newest version of Gutenberg and Sarah noticing that the image is blinking and all these things, you know what would be cool? And I'm not trying to, you know, give y'all any other additional tasks or anything. But since you're keeping an eye on Gutenberg, so you're scrutinizing it, every new thing. It's changing so quickly, and changes to it are happening so rapidly. You know what would be cool is to actually keep track of and have lots of GIFs and photos of the build process. It's like watching a skyscraper go up in a way. There are a lot of people working on a lot of parts. And so to be able to walk through the evolution of how Gutenberg was built, once it ships and happens, it would make a pretty cool wrap-up post to say, at one point, these images blinked weird and nobody liked it. And so they moved on to this other way of loading stuff. And it would be it'd be a neat progression. So, you know,
so far, Sarah's done a very good job of that so far, because most of the time when she's illustrating how something works in Gutenberg, really the only way to show it off is an animated GIF. So we've had a couple of those added to the various posts. And I've actually done that before when something is being worked on and having an image of it, you know, writing about the build process. And then it's nice in the end coming back to it and say, it works this way when it used to work this way because this way's better. But yeah, we're already on top of that, sir.
All right. Okay, good. Just making sure.
Let's get on to our picks of the week. And speaking of Gutenberg, my pick of the week is a Gutenberg boilerplate for third-party custom blocks by Ahmad Awais. How do you want to give it a shot? Awais?
I would say Awais, yeah.
Awais, okay. Shout out to him. I know he's a fan of the show, fan of the tavern, and an awesome member of the WordPress community. You should follow him on Twitter. But the boilerplate is a great way to learn the basics on creating custom blocks for Gutenberg. So we already have developers who are digging into the JavaScript and the code to figure out how to create custom blocks for Gutenberg. And this boilerplate comes with 4 different example blocks where you can have a block with custom CSS for the editor in the front end, a block with ES6 or ES Next in the Webpack build process, a block with editable content, or a block to click tweet the contents of that block. And each 4 of those examples kind of gives you insight into how some of the internal processes work with Gutenberg and how to create your own custom blocks. And in addition to that boilerplate, he also shares his thoughts on the Gutenberg project. And he actually had some concerns on how it makes the development more difficult. And there are some other issues as well that he mentions in his post that sounded pretty concerning at this point for Gutenberg and how it will impact developers. So definitely check that out. I'll have a link to that in the show notes if you're interested in how to create your own custom blocks for Gutenberg already.
And, you know, since I'm nostalgic, my pick of the week this week is a plugin by my friend Scott Riley. Y'all may know him as Coffee to Code. He works a lot on WordPress.org stuff and some other things over.
Yeah, he only has like 60 plugins in the repo.
I think 90 maybe.
Oh, whoops!
I'm not sure.
He's a busy bee.
He's got a plugin called Add Admin CSS, and it is just a plugin you turn on that gives you some text areas to either import CSS files or write your own admin CSS. And under Appearance, you'll have an admin CSS menu for admins to add their own style sheets and styling in the admin area that maybe don't belong in a custom color theme. Maybe you want to white label or change some bits and pieces about the admin area styling for yourself or a client or something it is that you're trying to build. And he has a little plugin that lets you do that. And so it's one of those tiny, atomic, single-purpose solution plugins that I really have an affinity for. And so most of Scott's plugins are something like that. But this was one where, everyone's focusing on the new Shiny and Calypso and Gutenberg and all these things. And so I'll come at it from the other angle to say that having the ability to quickly dump some CSS into a box and hit save and have it do something instantly is that instant satisfaction that I think Ahmad is talking about with writing plugins and extensions and things for WordPress. It's hard to get more simple than actions and filters. And we're all used to just hooking in and having something happen and going with it. And so Gutenberg is going to require a lot of additional complexity to write modules at first anyways, until APIs come in and things get more modular and we all get more familiar and everything else. So you're going to keep picking complicated ones, and I'll try and keep picking simple ones then. And that's my pick of the week.
You bring up filters and what have you, and I want to see if I can look this up really quick. And
you looking for JavaScript filters or things?
Yeah. I just saw the ticket the other day that there's going to be JavaScript filters possibly in 4.9.
Yep.
So there you have it. I guess all we're waiting for now is JavaScript hooks, huh?
Well, and they work differently. They have to work differently.
Right.
That's how JavaScript is a different thing. And so, in theory, if you have your own JavaScript file in a plugin or a theme, it can kind of do whatever it wants, the same as PHP can kind of do whatever it wants. And so, the idea or concept of filters or hooks or actions at specific execution points in the JavaScript is going to be a different thing altogether. How we approach it, the naming scheme, the camel casing, the way JavaScript works is just inherently different. So there are some places in WordPress core now that have some triggers in the JavaScript, but standardizing that and introducing more of them as we go will be a really, really big deal for future JavaScript enhancements and things, specifically for things like Gutenberg and the customizer and so on.
Which we talked about in depth a bit, this whole conversation back when we talked about JavaScript frameworks a few episodes back. So if you're wanting to learn and know a little bit more about that, definitely go back in the archive and check out that episode on the JavaScript framework debate, which was a pretty cool show. So that's going to do it for today's episode of WordPress Weekly. You can find show notes for this episode and all other episodes on WPTavern.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffro, JEFFR0. And how about you, John?
On Twitter and GitHub at JJJ, and my blog at jjj.blog.
Quick announcement. Next week, there will be no show as I will be taking a staycation. I have an unlimited staycation policy at my job, so let's see how unlimited it really is.
I'm not comfortable taking the training wheels off yet. I'm not going to do a show by myself without you, Jeff. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome. By me of going on vacation, you, sir, get a break.
That's awesome. Take more.
Take more. So hopefully it's what I need. Clear my head. I'll come back, energized, ready to do a full slate of shows. There are a couple people I'm working on getting on the show. Topher Kenobi. He the guy behind Hero Press. I'm working to get him on the show. Hopefully we'll do the Gutenberg Roundtable here in the next month or so. And if possible, try and get Matt on the show before WordCamp US. That would be an excellent episode. And before we wrap it up here, John, you did a thing on Twitter about if you could be a superhero, what technical term would you be called? And I enjoyed calling myself the Fatal Error. So I just wanted to throw
That was
out
good.
there.
That was one of my favorites.
There you have it. So everybody enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you again in about 2 weeks. Don't miss us too much. We'll be back. Everybody stay safe.
Bye, y'all.
So long. Bye-bye.